So if you price it too high, you may end up selling it for less than the market value of the house is today, 6 months from now.
Welcome to the RE Real Estate Podcast, where we discuss buying and selling real estate in black and white. Here are your hosts, Ben Harang and Clint Galliano.
Clint, good afternoon. How you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful, Ben. How you doing?
I'm doing terrific on a sunny afternoon in the middle of the week. We might look a little different than we normally look. Clint's on the road, parked somewhere in Egypt somewhere, not driving while he's talking. So safety's in mind, but he's on a mobile spot through our recording app, and there's a good chance to see how that works for us. And welcome to this version of RE Real Estate Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Ben Harang, with Clint Galliano. Our topic today is the importance of proper pricing from a seller's perspective. I have some thoughts on it, Clint. I'm going to let you say a few words, and then I'll kind of get into the meat of it.
Yep. So the main thing that we want to get across is that we strive to price the property at a point that it has the likeliest chance of getting a contract immediately. Ultimately, it's going to depend on the goals of the seller, on if the more important goal is to get it sold fast, or if it's to get a price that they want. If they're going for a price that they want, then it may possibly never get sold, depending on how it compares to what the market analysis tells us. And so that's what I got to say about that.
Okay, well, that's good. That's good. So the way we look at it from several different angles. At least I do. We find comparables as close as we can in construction, size, and location to where the house is located. We look at what's sold. We look at what's active on the market. We look at what's pending. We look at what's expired, because those expireds tell us a lot about the market, in that if the house expired, chances are it was overpriced and didn't sell. So we have a ceiling for how high a price can go and not sell. So it kind of gives us some parameters. The lower number of days on the market a house sits, the more competitive it's usually priced. A lot of people don't look at expireds. A lot of people don't look at the actives or the pendings. They just look at the closed sales. I like to look at all of them just to give me an idea. It just kind of confirms the thought process about what the value of the house is, if all of them are pointing to the same number. The days on the market, like Clint said, is indicative of a pricing problem. The longer the house is on the market, the more overpriced it was. So by looking at days on the market, just in general, we can tell how many houses are overpriced, and by not how much they're overpriced, but the fact that they're overpriced. The expireds, in my mind, tell you as much about the pricing as the closed sales. And generally, the expireds, dollar per square foot, when you plug them in, are a lot more than the closed sales. So as Clint said, if you want to get your price and hang it out there, that's on you. If your house is listed, you need to have an honest conversation with whoever's representing you to have a realistic idea of the true value of your house. So we gather all the data, we put it together, and we sit down with the seller and go over it. And a lot of times the sellers want to cherry pick. Well, the house across the street sold. It's not on the list. It's probably on the list. It might have been a for sale by owner, or they heard it was sold for more than it really did, or they heard the house was smaller than it really is to make the dollar per square foot go up. They sometimes will overestimate the square footage of their house, which would inflate the market value of the house. If somebody thinks they have 2,400 square feet of living area and they have 2,000 square feet of living area, just at $100 a square foot, it's $40,000. It's a difference when it doesn't sound like it's a lot of square footage difference, but when you apply $100 plus for the dollar per square foot, it adds up in a hurry. So we talk to the sellers. Sellers sometimes are realistic. Sometimes they think their house is more valuable than any house on the market. It's kind of something we run into a lot. And we have an honest adult conversation with the sellers about how long it should take to sell the house, what the pricing strategy needs to be to sell the house, and see if we can come to an agreement on what the house should be listed for. Generally, the sellers are pushing to go higher, and we're generally trying to hold the line to price it competitively so we can sell it. And the conversation would be something like, okay, you want to list it for $240 and it should be listed for $200. Let's list it for $240. If we hadn't had any activity in 2 weeks, we'll reduce it to $220. If we hadn't had any activity in another 2 weeks, we reduce it to $200 and go ahead and sell the house.
And hope
One of the other
that
things we
that
look at
price hasn't,
is,
the market price hasn't dropped down below that 200.
and I've seen people chasing the values going down. I have seen that where that if they'd have priced it right initially, it would have sold. But by the time they get to that right price is no longer the right price, and it's a little bit less. So they keep chasing it, and that's never a good conversation to have. But the absorption rate also plays a factor. We had a meeting yesterday, and we were talking about old times and economic graphs and things like that. After Hurricane Katrina, we had 25 active listings in the Bayou Board of Realtors. Everybody was buying everything up at any price. Today we have over 1,000 active listings in the Bayou Board of Realtors. Population is maybe up a little bit, but when you go from 25 active listings to 1,000 active listings, it becomes a buyer's market, and the sellers need to get creative to sell their house. So if a balanced market is one that is somewhere an absorption rate of about 3 to 4 months. Right now we have an absorption rate of 8 months, which means if we list no more properties with the rate that we sell houses a month, it would take us 8 months to sell out of the inventory. So there's a lot of competition out there. So for the sellers that want to sell your house, need to sell your house, want to move up, want to move down, want to move with the grandkids, or whatever your reason is, you need to get creative to sell your house. You don't have to give it away, but you do need to get creative.
Yeah, so one of the other things that I like to look at also, and this is more for demonstrative purposes to the seller, is to look at the active listings that are comparable to the subject property. So subject property is the seller's property that we're trying to sell, and the comparables are basically, like the word says, properties that are comparable to the subject property. So we find the active listings that are comparable to that subject property and show them to the sellers, and especially in this type of market where we've got a lot of listings and not as many buyers as we had a couple of years ago in the aberration market of the COVID era, and
Hmm.
show them that you're trying to compete against all of these properties that are of a similar style, size, and finish, and they're priced here. And if you want to sell quickly, then to stand out, you don't need to be priced here because they're priced here and they're still here. They're not sold.
Right, right. I tell people, some people will ask, how long will it take to sell? Well, we can look at the average days on the market, and it's somewhere in 140 days today from list to close. Um, we can make your house the next house on the market to sell by pricing it aggressively and having an effective marketing campaign for the house. Um, it's a matter of what the motivation is for the seller. If they have to get top dollar, like you talked about, Clint, if they want to move on so they can spend more time with their grandkids, the the money's still important, but it's not the motivating factor. Um, we get hung up on price a lot, and sometimes money is just not the factor. There's other underlying causes that we need to develop in our conversations with the sellers to find out what the true motivation is, so we can try to help them uh, meet meet their goals and move on with their life.
Yeah, that's the ultimate goal, is helping sellers meet their goals. The the things so pricing it's critical. There's other things involved, and we're going to cover those in other episodes. But the initial pricing is critical. One of the things we want to try and avoid is putting the property on the market at a price point that's not conducive to getting it sold, and then having it sit on the market, because we can reduce prices and eventually we'll get to a point where someone's going to make an offer and realize that, hey, I'm willing to pay that much for that property. But the big problem is that a house sitting on the market, the buyers in the market are going to start saying, what's wrong with that property? Why hasn't it sold? And if the price is the issue, just by looking at the specs and the price, they'll say, I'm not paying that for that house. And if we can get them in the door to come take a look at it, do a showing, they may still respond, I'm not paying that for that house. The goal is to get buyers to look at the house and want it enough to make an offer, and hopefully a good offer, so that we can get the house sold.
Hmm. Yeah, and I've seen over over time where house is overpriced, and we talk about the real price or the market price at the time, and the seller's not interested in selling at that price. And they said, they're not motivated. They don't have to sell it. There's all kind of comments that a seller will try to lead people to believe it doesn't really matter to them if they sell their house or not. Well, in my mind, if you, oh,
Oops.
okay, we lost that. Let me pull that off the wall and we can. Okay, now I forgot where I was. Over time, I've seen houses be overpriced. They're not willing to sell them for the price that the market says they're worth. And 3 months, 6 months later, the market changes and they may have gotten an offer early on for the right price and decided not to sell it. And 3 or 4 months later, they're begging for that same offer. And those people have gone on and bought another house. So if you price it too high, you may end up selling it for less than the market value of the house is today, 6 months from now.
That's kind of the part of the point that I was trying to get across is that you're gonna bypass that original market price that we've advised on by pricing it high and then doing price reductions to try and catch up. You'll wind up bypassing that original price that someone would have gladly
Right.
been happy to pay, but at
Mm-hmm.
that point they've moved on, or in the case of an investor perspective, they say, well, that was that price at that time. Now I'm only going to offer this price.
Right. We also were talking the other day about the cost of insurance and the cost of the interest rates. The interest rates affect everybody nationally the same. And it's my opinion that interest somewhere between 6 and 7% is kind of the equilibrium rate. A lot of people don't like to hear that, but generally the historical rate is somewhere like 6.22% over time. So if you get in the 6% rate, it's a competitive rate. That kind of gives the market a balance between buyers and sellers. A couple of years ago, we had the 2.5, 2 3/4, and you couldn't keep a house on the market. They were paying over list price and waiving the appraisals, waiving the inspections, neither of which I think are a good idea. But people were doing it, whether it was free money, cheap money, COVID, whatever the reason was, people were doing it. Well, we're not in that market today. And, we talked about how many listings we have on the market. There are a lot of people that think about selling their house until they look at that 2 3/4% interest rate that they have on the house. That would be replaced by a 6.5% interest rate on a 30-year fixed rate home loan. So all of a sudden they're really not motivated to sell that house. It makes them feel like they like it a little more than they thought they did. But when you add the cost of insurance to it, sometimes it's not affordable for them to stay in the house. So there's all kinds of things to consider. Hopefully they're doing some things on a state level to address the rising cost of the property insurance in South Louisiana, the Lafourche-Terrebonne parishes, which grossly increase the cost of living here. Whether you buy a house or rent, you're still paying for the insurance. So I still think if you're going to live here, you're better off buying than you are renting and paying somebody else's mortgage. So, but if you want to sell your house, you need to price it properly at the end of the day.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree.
All right.
All right, Ben.
Any other
We
comments?
got
So
any?
covered or what?
No. I think we've done a good job of covering the topic. Uh, I don't think that we have a whole lot more to add. I mean, we could probably tell stories, but let's save that for
Yeah.
a story episode.
Save that for a rainy day.
That's
Um,
right.
and it is more than just price. There's prep work and everything else that we'll get to in a different podcast. But price is at the top of the importance of the proper pricing is at the top of the list that you want to get right. So, all right. Well, Clint, be careful on the road. We may see you when you get back. And until next time, I'll have a great week.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, share with your friends. realestatepodcast.com,
Uh,
RE Real Estate Podcast on YouTube.
I'll forget to do that. Thanks for the reminder. Yeah. Share it and help us get the word out. All right. Y'all have a good day. Be safe on the road, Clint.
Peace out.
While we may discuss topics such as lending, interest rates, title law, real estate law, and appraisals in addition to real estate sales and transactions, please remember that we are only trained and licensed as real estate salespeople in Louisiana. The information shared on this podcast is for general purposes only and should not be taken as legal or financial advice. We may be agents, but unless we have signed paperwork stating otherwise, we are not your agents.